Today's episode is the first in a series of deep dives with Alexis on a variety of health topics. Today we dive into the crucial realizations you need before working to optimize your health. We differentiate between disease care, wellness care, and performance optimization, and reveal why using disease care tools for wellness or performance optimization often fails. We'll explore the concept of wellness philosophically and discover the key concepts that should guide your health optimization journey. Join us for an engaging conversation that explores the major drivers of longevity in a wider context that is crucial to know before you start optimizing. Welcome. Alexis, thanks for coming in again. Our last attempt at a conversation got lost in the vagaries of memory card, but it was such a valuable conversation I wanted to try and recreate it to the degree that we can.
Awesome.
Usual health care is actually disease care. And that's good, that's important. If you have pneumonia, we want to take care of that. We want to deal with problems. So I don't want to run that down. I spend a lot of time learning disease care. There's a lot to it. We do some great work there. But then we talked about this idea of wellness. And then you had brought up, I think, this interesting idea of performance.
Right.
And so we had started moving along that axis and just talking about some of the vagaries of that. One thing that we had gotten into a little bit of discussion about was like trying to use the tools of disease care for wellness or performance was a bit of a failed attempt. And so using things like blood work or imaging like MRIs and just exploring the reasons why that doesn't work super well. First of all, neither of these is nearly as accurate as people think. I did an experiment I think I told you about where I had 15 samples drawn out of my vein at the same time and sent under fake names to the same lab. The same blood, same lab, same time, literally one vein stick, 15 samples, got a little lightheaded.
Yeah.
And the results were pretty widespread. The testosterone was plus or minus 40, the bicarbonate was plus or minus, I think, 7 or 8, and pretty significant, 25% at least. And I worked with a statistician, modeled that out. And if you have a bell curve of results, right, I did 15 samples, but most of that's going to be from the middle of the bell curve. So with just 15, you're probably not catching the results. So you could get a testosterone, we modeled it out, plus or minus 90 is within the realm of just sampling error. So that's not even accounting for actual variance. That's just test error. And that's why for testosterone we need 2 samples, and we have all these protocols in medicine that most doctors don't know the why of it. If you ask your regular family doc, why do I have to have 2 samples of testosterone? They don't know this. They haven't gotten that detailed into the details of lab testing. Same for bicarbonate. It's like, we all have this attitude because we learn it in residency on a practical basis that, your bicarbonate's a little off, it's fine, it's fine. But then patients see these results and they're like, wait, it says low, it says it's off, but this is the why, is because that answer is actually plus or minus quite a lot.
So I did my annual physical in February, and I did the blood work, and I got the results.
Sure.
And for each item, it had the normal healthy range.
Sure.
And so it was pretty simple, and in some cases, maybe there's some color coding that helps. But it was pretty simple to say, if I'm in range, I'm okay. And if I'm out of range, then that's a conversation. So you just go through and you flag the ones that are out of range. But then, being a high achiever, I'm like, some of them are close to the end of the range. They're in range, but they're close. And then when I looked at previous results, they were closer to the end than they were before. So then, what do I do with that? But then this is interesting what you're saying about noise. But if we could just take a step back.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, we talked about, first, there's something wrong. I want to go to you as an expert, so you can understand it, understand root cause, fix it, make it go away, get me back to full functioning, which is over here.
Yep.
Be that maybe some disease, some illness. But that's different than this. This is about, there's nothing wrong, but you're also wondering, is this all there? Is there opportunity? Is there an opportunity to improve?
Right.
Baseline is okay, no big problems. But maybe there's an opportunity that I'm not partaking of. And then this performance is different from wellness. This is maybe going further out there, where this is, I don't want to just be overall copacetic. I want to perform really well.
Sure.
Maybe at the extreme, go to the Olympics, win a gold medal, or maybe for a normal person, it's maybe achieve something athletically or in some other way that you haven't been able to.
Yeah.
And really excel. And now, of course, I realized many years ago, I will never be a professional soccer player. But you still want to be good. You want to be better than you've been, and you want to be maybe as good as you can.
Yep.
Within reason.
And that's what we mean when we start talking about optimizing. We're talking about performance. You're trying to optimize your performance.
And this is maybe optimizing for balance. This may be optimizing on a particular vector, if that makes sense. So for example, I think of like in cycling. I was preparing for a mountain bike race. And they were telling us about all these gel packs and all these things you would do because fuel management is very important. This was a 50-mile race. And the guy who was explaining this to us said, just so you know, none of these are healthy for you. So get that out of your mind. This is about performance on race day.
Sure.
And I'm thinking of, I'm here to be healthy. So now I'm conflicted. So the point is that these pull you in different directions. But I think also there's another thing I wanted to ask you about, which is, I think of this, there's like supply and demand. So from the patient or the customer or the client standpoint, these are the things maybe we think about, which is maybe demand. But then in terms of supply, as a practitioner, as a healthcare professional, healthcare provider, you have what you provide, right? What you supply. And you supply these things, right? You're a primary care physician. So if we have a problem, you have protocols that you go through. But then there are also other things that you provide, right? In terms of overall counseling, guidance, different tools in the toolbox.
Sure.
So these tools are in the toolbox. I think to your point earlier, these tools are in the toolbox and these are developed over centuries to address primarily this condition. I think it's tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it's correct to say that that historically medicine has primarily been focused here.
Yep.
And this is a relatively modern thing to move this way.
That's true. Yeah.
So I'm thinking there's another
for medicine. Yeah.
So I'm thinking there's another axis. We have these three columns, but there's another axis here of what the medical profession provides. At the Orange Theory gym that I go to here in South Austin, Montana, next door there's a wellness clinic, and they offer IVs with vitamins and different things, which I think of IV as something that happens in the hospital.
Sure.
They're thinking of IV here or maybe here. So there are certain things that started here, and then as these things develop, then maybe new things are developed, and then these are extended, and then you go here, new things are developed, and they're all mixed up.
Totally. And I think that is maybe the core of what I would love to teach and to talk about, is that yes, that has happened, but without much evidence that it works. In the sense that, okay, yes, the IV idea started here, and then it migrated over to wellness, but there's no real evidence that it increases wellness. Like, partly because most people don't have a good definition of wellness.
Is there evidence, just starting back here, is it fair to say that there's evidence, I assume there's evidence that IV helps with disease healthcare?
Yes.
If you're in the hospital
with sepsis,
drug delivery and
drug delivery,
fluids.
But we're just talking about IV fluids. Yeah. So if you have sepsis, the cornerstone of therapy is starting with a massive dose of fluids and antibiotics if it's a bacterial infection. But like antibiotics and fluids are the core of that treatment because the main root cause is a bacterial infection. Let's say it's bacterial sepsis. There's a lot of different kinds of sepsis, but bacterial sepsis, let's say. So that you give the antibiotics to try to address that as soon as possible. And then the main immediate effect is a drop in blood pressure. Barring heart disease or other contraindications, we just flood you with IV fluids, boost up your total volume so that you can maintain your blood pressure, keep pushing oxygen to your brain, and gives us time for the antibiotics to work.
Okay. So as a layperson, and tell me if this is the right way to think about it, if we think of these different levels of healthcare, if I think of this box up here as traditional Western medicine, my understanding and expectation is that the bar is high in terms of evidence and proof that for drugs to be approved, for procedures to become the standard of care, for medical devices and instruments to be approved, there needs to be strong statistical evidence from things that were done properly, peer-reviewed, to be in this box.
You would like that to be the case.
Assume that to be the case. It sounds like that's maybe not always the case.
It's not always the case. Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons for that, some of which are historical. So one of my favorite trials is the Orbita trial, right? I have a whole video on that. And basically what they did, so the first cardiac stent ever done was done in someone that had all the symptoms of a heart attack or impending heart attack. Chest pain, tightness, weight on the chest, shortness of breath, sweatiness, whenever they would walk too far. They had this for 6 months. Now they weren't having a heart attack, but anytime they walked more than a block, they would get all these symptoms. So we call that angina. We call angina is what we call pain that seems to be cardiac or in origin. It was chronic, it was more than 6 months. And when they did an angiogram, they went in, they looked at the blood vessels of the heart with dye, they saw a narrowing, a blockage, and they put a stent in there, they opened up that blockage, and the guy's pain went away, he did well, and for 40 years after that, we put stents in people's heart arteries.
And then in this example, this was in response to angina, to
chronic
symptoms,
angina.
but not to a heart attack or stroke.
Correct. And it's not a heart attack, it's not a stroke. And there are other studies done on people that are having a heart attack. And you go in, you look at their artery, it is completely blocked, it's closed off. You go in, you open that up.
With a stent.
With a stent. And it is very clearly life-saving, very clear improvement in outcomes in every possible way. In this situation, and so it's important to realize that we have clear evidence that putting stent, later, by the way, that's not the original use, but we started using it very logically in people that were having a heart attack.
So the original use was preventing heart attacks and strokes.
It was treating this anginal pain.
Okay.
Was the original idea there. So this, what we call chronic stable angina, right? More than 6 months, stable, not getting worse, no heart attack happening. Then we did studies on people that are actively having heart attacks, right? What we call STEMIs now. And putting a stent in as soon as possible, the sooner the better for a STEMI. We aim for less than 90 minutes, what we call door to balloon time. Meaning the time when you hit the ER doors to the time when that balloon is inflated and the stent is opened, we aim for 90 minutes.
Wow.
Because time is heart, and that's part of what we're looking at. So those studies were all done showing improvement.
Showing improvement in angina or showing improvement in terms of heart attacks?
Heart attack, yeah, in mortality. So
Okay.
reduced mortality, better outcomes across the board when you do that with an acute STEMI.
Okay.
We'll leave aside NSTEMI and other conditions. Then if we're talking about chronic stable angina, it's very logical. You have a 90% blockage, a 95% blockage. You're having all the symptoms every time you challenge your heart at all. We go in, we put a stent, we open it up, you feel better, and this happened for 40 years. Seemed pretty logical.
So number one, you're suffering from very low blood flow. Say 95% blockage is only 5% blood flow. Number two, presumably that's building up over time, so you're approaching that 95 going to 99 or 100, so on both sides.
And then in 2016, they did a trial where they took people, you had to have more than 70% blockage to get into the trial. So to get into the trial, you had to have 70% blockage. You had to have all the symptoms, just exactly these types of patients. They did a stress test, Bruce protocol, where you walk on the treadmill and you had to have limited mobility, like you couldn't walk as far because of the pain. They took all of the people to the cath lab. They gave them sedation. They put music on their ears. They made sure the procedure lasted at least 15 or 20 minutes for everybody. Everybody got an angiogram. They went into the artery.
Wow.
They went up. They looked at the
I was going to ask
heart.
if everybody got an incision.
Everybody got an incision. They went up. They looked. They did the dye. Half of them they actually put a stent in. Half of them they looked at it and did nothing. And everybody had the same improvement.
Wow.
And so, come to find out, for 40 years, that's been placebo effect.
Wow.
Both people got everything except the stent. And that's why I say the placebo effect is way stronger than we wish it were. Like, it's a profound effect. We've had the same effect with meniscal surgeries now. They go in for so many years, they say, oh, a torn meniscus, we'll go in, we'll sew it up, we'll clean it up, we'll do whatever. Now, with a sham surgery, it does no better than a real surgery. If you go in, you do the surgery, you look, but you don't sew it up, you get the same benefit as if you actually do the surgery.
So my understanding as a layperson that there's this really high hurdle is not always correct.
And part of the challenge, and people like Vinay Prasad talk about this, part of the challenge is that we want medicine to move faster than it can. If I want a double-blind placebo-controlled trial that drug X reduces mortality, I actually have to do a pretty long, pretty big study waiting for people to die. So I don't want to do that. That's too much time. So instead of death, I'll choose, or instead of heart attack, I'll just choose a marker for heart attack, maybe a risk factor. Does this lower your cholesterol?
So you try to simplify, make it easier, make it doable.
But then many times, the marker isn't the disease, and you've adjusted the marker, but you haven't actually changed the outcome.
Okay, so this is interesting. So if I think of this quadrant, approved Western medicine,
Okay.
FDA approved
Sure.
Western medicine. And then there are other things that maybe are unregulated, right? Like supplements.
Sure, correct.
I don't know if we call it unregulated.
Yep.
And then there's a whole other set of stuff where you need to leave the US if you want to do it, right?
Sure.
What do we call that category?
Stem cell, yeah, maybe experimental, although this probably, I think the line between these two is pretty thin.
Okay.
Yeah.
But my point is that as we go from left to right, the burden of proof, the level of rigor drops.
And that's the weird thing. So here's,
But also, just one last point. When we go from up here to down here, it drops.
Yep.
And then if we go this way, it's dropping
a lot.
a lot.
So here's one of my points, and I'll use the COVID vaccine as a great example. The COVID vaccine, they did a great study. 30,000 people, placebo-controlled. They used elderly people, that had never had COVID, and the results were amazing. Significant reduction in hospitalization, significant reduction in death. Awesome. But if you take somebody who is 65, we're talking about, this is the era of Delta variant COVID, which was more deadly than Alpha, right? So 65 plus and naive. They had never had it before, right? And of course, they never had a vaccine because it's the first vaccine. In this population, it was very effective, placebo-controlled. So if I take a kid who's 15, right? The problem is this person has a reasonably high risk of death to begin with. And so detecting a reduction in death is actually relatively easy. This 15-year-old has an incredibly low risk of death. So in order to detect it, I would actually need a study of hundreds of thousands of kids to have an effective study in that population. But we didn't do that. We did a study in 2,000 kids and rubber stamped it across the board. And come to find out, in males...
You said 2,000? And this was...
2,600. This was 30,000.
Wow. So
we
when
did
you
the
needed
opposite.
more
Yes.
quantity, so it was really more, I dare say, going through the motions.
Yes, very much going through the motions. And that's the issue, is that actually the same thing for wellness, you need a higher level of proof. You need more people to prove a wellness issue. But that's the opposite of what we get.
It's interesting as you describe this because you're describing the healthcare profession, which is practitioners, regulators, government, manufacturers, everybody collectively. But in some ways, this also is what we do ourselves as individuals when we say, I want to get healthy, and we, for example, fixate on our weight. And if you're overweight and you lose weight, that's good, but you can lose too much.
Yep.
Or you could actually be doing things to reduce your weight that actually are reducing your life expectancy or your health.
Absolutely.
It may be helping, it may be hurting.
And there are three factors there. So now we're getting into the wellness category. So we'll move over here, and I love that. So with any marker, you use weight, we can use anything. We can use hemoglobin A1C, that's a diabetes sugar glucose metric. If you take diabetics who have an A1C of above 10, they don't do very well. Increased risk of heart attack, kidney disease, eye disease, neuropathy, all the things. If you reduce that to 8, they do much better. If you reduce that to 7.5, they do slightly better. If you reduce that less than 7.5, so far we don't have any evidence that they do better. Mortality minimizes around 7.5. Normal is less than 6.5. Now, caveats to this. These studies were done on an older set of drugs, higher risk of side effects. It's possible that the reason we didn't see benefit was because of the type of drug being used.
Maybe because of net benefit. Maybe there's some benefit here, but some side effect of the drug negated.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. What we can say is that very clearly there was reducing benefit.
Diminishing returns.
Diminishing returns. So if there's a benefit of going less than 6.5, we weren't able to detect it with that set of drugs, Certainly, if you're talking about going from 5 to 4 inside the normal range, it's hard to imagine there's a benefit there. And
Maybe negative because of these side effects you're talking about.
correct. So 3 issues. Number 1, is this in the causal chain? Meaning, if I change this, do I change outcomes? And for A1C, that it is in the causal chain. If you change A1C, you change outcomes. Number 2, almost all markers are on a diminishing or U-shaped curve. So you get benefit, it levels out, and then you start getting harm. So over-optimizing any marker, A1C, whatever, is very possible and likely. Exercise is on a U-shaped curve. Like, it's a long one. Like, exercise, it's like this, but it does ultimately go down at the end. It takes a lot to get there. You have to be like Olympic level working, but it does exist, right? There is too much. And so understanding that any particular marker can, by contrast, my favorite example, homocysteine, is not in the causal chain. Very well connected, associated with heart disease, but if you change it, it doesn't change the outcome. So you can manipulate this variable, but it doesn't actually change the outcome. So when you're trying to figure out what to measure, what to figure out, what to change, you have to figure out, is it in the causal chain? What is the U-shaped curve? And then the third one is that how you do it matters. So if I lower my A1C with meds, then the medicine matters. If I use a sulfonylurea,
Is that a medicine?
it is a type of medicine, it's a class. Versus one of the new GLP-1s, the Mounjaros and Ozempic, this has no mortality benefit. It reduces the A1C, but has no mortality benefit, does not reduce death or heart attacks or strokes. This does.
Interesting.
So how you do it actually matters quite a lot, and that's true of how you lose weight. If you do it by taking meth, you're not going to reduce mortality.
So here, my physician said, dial back the rice and bread.
That's a dietary intervention. And we can get, so if we want to really get into A1C here, we can jump into it. So A1C, let's say we're talking about 10, we're going to 8. I mentioned using sulfonylurea. Older drug, it does reduce neuropathy, it does reduce retinal damage, and it does reduce kidney disease.
These sound like good improvements.
Good things. It's not that you shouldn't do it. It tends to increase weight, and it has no effect on heart disease or death.
That's interesting. It can improve these things without impacting death.
Correct. So these are small vessel damage, so it improves the damage that's done by the sugar itself, but the damage to the big vessels doesn't seem to happen. Or this seems to continue despite using this, right? Now, if you talk about the GLP-1s, you do see a reduction in heart disease and death as well as all the other benefits. If you talk about diet, again, you see all the benefits. And mostly because diet actually, again, reduces weight, so do the GLP-1s. The seemingly common factor is if your intervention increases weight, then you don't get these benefits. If your intervention reduces weight, then the heart disease and death benefits also are seen. So metformin, GLP-1s, Farxiga, that class, the SGLT2s, Jardiance, all of them reduce weight and all of them actually reduce mortality. Wow. But sulfonylurea, insulin, that class of meds, they reduce all these things, but you don't see them.
What about exercise? Exercise presumably would reduce weight.
I haven't seen it's hard to do a randomized control trial on exercise. You know whether you're exercising. But yes, if you reduce weight, it does seem to reduce heart disease and death. My biggest point is that not every way of doing this has this improvement. Similarly, if you reduce, I gave my meth example, that's an extreme example, right? And so part of the thing is how you get there matters. And those are the 3 factors. Is the biomarker in the causal chain, meaning adjusting it actually adjusts the outcome? Appreciating that you can over-optimize and there's a limit to how far it matters, right? And number 3, how you do it matters quite a lot.
That makes sense.
And if we take all of those into this, we end up with a very limited set of meaningful biomarkers.
I think of these, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think of drugs as a meaningful intervention on the body.
Okay.
So if you're able to achieve something with a simpler intervention, maybe your cholesterol is really high, maybe you need to take statins, but if you're able to lower it with maybe better eating or exercise, that's preferable. When you do these drugs, they may have other effects on the body, they may have interactions It's a card you decide to play, but there's also, at some level, a cost or a potential cost to playing that card.
Sure. And the potential cost that is usually not appreciated for lifestyle factors. So we're trying to compare behavior change.
Which is like diet and exercise.
Yeah. Behavior change versus pharma. The failure here, or the risk here, is inconsistency. Man, I didn't spell that correctly. Consistency. I'm missing several letters there. Inconsistency.
So you do it right for a month.
There you go.
But then you get the green light, everything's good, and then you fall off.
And then you fall off. I really like Mike Irzutell's kind of commentary on weight. So this is his model, and I agree with it at least in big picture. He says there's 3 factors. One is how available and cheap are calories. If calories are hard to come by, you have to go hunt an elk in order to get any. Like, the cost of getting calories, either in effort or money, is high, and that will limit people's weight as a population. We're not there.
Which was the first 98% of human existence.
Correct. But that's changed, and it's not changing back. The second factor is conscientiousness. And the third factor is hunger drive. How much food does it take for you to be satisfied? And then conscientiousness is how much time, energy, effort are you able or willing to put into controlling that third factor. We feel like, oh, you're not, there's gluttony and there's all these kinds of like judgments that are passed because it just is a factor. And there is an aspect of effort and there is an aspect of attention. But I've gained 5 pounds recently. Now I have to redo and re-engage this, but it's hard to be consistent.
Yeah,
now,
because life changes.
Correct.
Motivations change.
Correct. And the cool thing about the GLP-1s is it's the first time we've had anything that strongly controls that third factor. Until now, this is a social issue. We don't individually have control over that.
Right.
We only individually have had control over this. Now we can pull this lever a little bit. And that's the value of it. Now, if you want to pull that lever a little bit, like there's side effects, there's risks, there's issues there.
But it's a discussion.
It's a discussion.
And the answer is non-obvious.
It's non-obvious.
And in some cases, this may be the better way.
Yeah, absolutely. And many people just have an incredibly high hunger drive. And it would take an incredible amount of conscientiousness to control that hunger drive. And then based on life circumstance, maybe they don't have that, their attention is on dealing with poverty, dealing with stress, dealing with death, dealing with depression, dealing with all these things. They don't have that excess mental energy to spend controlling that hunger drive. Versus my buddy, he doesn't like sweets, and he eats like a salad, and he's like, oh man, it's so good, I'm so full. And I'm like, well, are you out of your mind? Like, you just ate a salad. That's not even food. And so I'm different. And his hunger drive is different than mine.
Yeah.
And so I have to spend more conscientiousness to achieve the outcome.
So since we're over here.
And a privileged place of being able to do that.
In terms of wealth and time, attention,
knowledge,
energy.
education, all of those things. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about wellness. So I think you mentioned you have maybe a simple working definition of wellness.
Yeah, I just came up with this, so let's not take it too seriously. This is my brainwave. But I feel like it's something like I think the experience of wellness is what we experience when we feel we are making adequate progress on the right path. And both of those things are somewhat subjective.
Sure. So progress on a path.
Progress on a path. And the notion there, this is born to some degree out of our previous discussion. You had said that we have this sense that our lives are going along a certain trajectory and then maybe we break our arm and our health goes down in some way. And then we try to recover and we try to get back on that path. We try to get back on that trajectory. But maybe we're not able to and then we're at a lower level, right? Yeah. Or maybe we just continue here, or maybe we keep declining. And there's that sense, right? That over time, what we want is progress on the path.
There's this ideal.
Yep.
And we want to be as close to it as possible.
And things that interrupt our progress on the path, we perceive it as an impact on our wellness.
And that could actually be present or future in the sense that, I may, for example, say, I want to be able to play soccer when I'm 60. Am I on a trajectory? I can play soccer now, that's great, but I want to be able to play when I'm 60.
Sure.
Can I get there? And what may be impeding that?
Yep. One of the most interesting notions out of that conversation we had is we know that this is the time axis, right? But most of us don't have this well defined.
Yeah, this we can measure pretty well. We can just measure chronologically or perhaps other ways. But this,
we don't have the right path well defined. and we don't have a great notion of adequate progress, and we don't have a great idea of how to measure adequate progress. And so I think that people end up trying to use any measurement that somebody can sell them without considering if that's the right thing to measure, because they haven't considered what the right path is.
I've seen at the gym.
Sorry, and just to finish that idea, like if the right path is building my family, and that's the path I want to be on, it's not clear that a blood work marker is a great metric for that. If the path is, hey, I want to revolutionize healthcare, I'm building River Rock, I want this, what blood work is a great metric? That's my path, but there's no relationship between the blood work and the path. So only because we don't define the path, we get fooled into this idea that we can optimize it by tracking a metric that actually may not have anything to do with. If you want to play soccer at 60, right, maybe there's some blood work that has impact on that, but probably not.
So it sounds like this is ambiguous, what this is. I would also argue it's dynamic. Maybe when you're in your 20s, you care about your family and putting a family together, but maybe when you're 40, you're thinking you want to be CEO, and then when you're 70, you're thinking make the pain go away. or something, or I want to see all 50 states in my RV.
Sure.
Hopefully it's more the latter than the former. So it's ambiguous and it's dynamic. So you're hitting a moving target. You're trying to hit a moving target that you can't quite see.
It's actually even worse than that, but yes. The reason it's worse than that is a concept that I really love. It's called an epistemic wall. And that is, there are moments in life that we cannot see over the wall. A good example is having a kid. Until you do it, you can't really know what it's like. You can guess, you can have a pet, or you can babysit other people's kids. You can try and approach it, but you don't really know. Similarly, for a big job or career switch, you don't really know what that career is like. Until I actually got into medicine, I didn't know anything about the bureaucracy or the paperwork. I had a vague idea I wanted to help people, but I didn't really know what it was like. And that's an epistemic wall where you cannot know what it will really feel like on the other side. You can only guess. And so there are these eras in life where we say, I'm ready to have a kid because I think I'm gonna find that meaningful. I think that's the path I need to be on, but until I do it, I can't know.
And many of those things are a one-way trip.
And that's what the death analogy, that's why we consider eras of life. The transition of an era, we invoke culturally the notion of death and rebirth. Because death is the final, like we don't know what's past it. We cannot, there's an epistemic wall there. And so that awareness, we tend to apply that mental model to these era shifts where, hey, in my 20s I was just pursuing my career, and then in my 30s I wanted to set up a family. And in transitioning from focusing on my career to focusing on my family, I had to die and be reborn.
One of the things that strikes me as we talk about wellness, I think that may work well for people that are very goal-oriented. Not everybody is.
Sure.
I was mentioning at the gym, a lot of people come in, and I overheard a conversation the other day, and a typical conversation that happens with the people visiting and the people that run the gym would be, they would ask the question, what is your goal? And again, I was just cleaning up and I overheard this conversation, and my initial thought was, they may not quite know what their goal is, other than maybe they just generally want to get more healthy. And they mumbled something about, we want to lose fat.
Okay.
Which again, my own speculation was that was just something they thought of that is
socially acceptable.
A simple way to say I want to improve my health, maybe slightly more specific, but perhaps maybe not more accurate.
Love that. I love
and so then they immediately got into, okay, what you want to do is lose fat, then you do this and this and you'll lose fat. And
let's dive into that. I'm so excited.
Yeah,
I'm so excited about this.
This.
Okay. If you ask someone, just your average person, how do you like your coffee? They might say cream or sugar, but the most common descriptor you'll get is strong. Not because people really like strong coffee, but because, what am I gonna say, weak? I like my coffee weak in water? No, on a social basis, that's not a great answer. So dark and strong are the descriptors because it's a character portrayal. I'm strong and I like strong coffee.
It's a positioning statement.
It's a positioning statement, right? Now, most people don't like strong coffee because it's bitter and it's dark, whatever. As people get into coffee, into specialty coffee, they develop a greater language around coffee, and they start to say things like, I like fruit-forward coffee. I like stone fruit.
This sounds like wine.
Wine is exactly the same.
Okay.
And so the ability to linguistically distinguish changes what you say, which changes the goals you pursue. Because then you say, actually, I like single origin. If you like the flavor that's considered tea-like, that actually is a polite way of saying weak. Now, in coffee language, you might say, I don't like it overbrewed. Okay, now I'm framing strong as a negative. The rephrasing there is overbrewed or over-extracted if you're being really...
Right.
So now I've found language
Nuanced
to
language.
negatively describe what everybody else is describing as strong and dark because they don't have the linguistic sophistication. So part of what we're talking about on that axis is, yes, they said fat loss because they didn't know what else to say. And part of what I do at River Rock, actually a lot of what I do with River Rock, is try to give language and explore the details of that question so that we can say, do you want to, or what's more important to you? Is it community or family or intimacy? Different social senses of meaning, senses of path, senses of purpose, but which one speaks to you? And this is what they feel like. Let's go into that. Let's explore.
Peeling back the layers. So what is it about fat loss that's appealing to you?
Why?
Or why do you want fat loss?
And this is my classic, so you've heard the Toyota 5 why kind of thing, right? So you ask why, and you start to get into the root causes. One of my favorite things to do with patients is say, okay, fat loss. Okay, why? Why should you lose fat? And so they say one thing. They say
And it could be, there's a wedding coming up.
Sure.
All of my parents and grandparents passed away of heart attacks, and I don't want to get a heart attack.
Correct. And then you say, so what's so bad about passing away by a heart attack? Why do you care? Oh,
Not that you shouldn't, but that you, as a questioner, we want to understand it.
And so say, oh, I don't want to leave my kids. Oh, so it's actually about family. It's actually about your kids. So why do you care about your kids? And then say, actually, I think that they're my legacy. I really love the idea of whatever. You can go why. My favorite thing is, and this is my practice in a nutshell, is when you hit the rock bottom, you can see their brain short circuit. So a lot of moms, you ask them, why do you care about your kids? And they short circuit because they recognize that it's a grammatically well-formed sentence or question, but it is a psychologically meaningless question. Psychologically, that just doesn't make any sense.
Because it's a given. Of course you care about it.
It's how I fit with the universe. Whereas, if sometimes you ask somebody, why do you care about your kids? And they start thinking, and they're like, it's because, and you haven't hit the ground level. There's something deeper there that underlies their care for their kids. Kids often is a short circuit. Hey, I'm starting this business, and I find that, why? Why do you care about starting this business? Is it because you want to change the world? Is it because you like discovering stuff? Those are different things.
So it sounds like as we get into this wellness space, I think of Maslow, and Maslow had his pyramid of needs. And then at the top, I think it was like self-actualization. And so it sounds like what's interesting is that where we started, healthcare, if we think of our physical needs, food, clothing, shelter, we need calories, we need temperature control, we need protection from the elements. So healthcare, disease care, over the centuries started here. But then as we're moving here, we're moving up the pyramid.
Yes, that's one way to think about it. One of the things I dislike about Maslow is that the hierarchy, I think, is better framed as a frame of mental progression. In that, I think there are a lot of people who do functionally, like a mother, is very much sacrificing physical health in order to self-actualize. That, like, very consciously, everybody understands that there's actual mortality risk involved in childbirth, you're sleeping less, eating less, all the things. And routinely they make that choice to undercut the lower levels, which Maslow doesn't have a great explanation for, in order to self-actualize.
So at some level these build upon each other, but at another level they maybe even compete with each other.
Yeah.
And this layered cake doesn't capture that idea of the competition.
Correct. That's one of my big arguments with Maslow.
And from an economic point of view, you could think of money, like where are you going to put your dollars?
Yep.
And in reality, obviously, it is money, but it's not just money. It's your time, your attention, your energy. The $100 test. Allocate your $100. And so it's the same thing here. And so I think that's part of what you're getting at is like mothers, for example, are allocating energy up here at the expense of this.
And here's my favorite thing is that when you're talking about self-actualization, right, the money you're spending is something like freedom. Because in order to become something, you have to not be something else. Anything you become, you are actualizing that potential. It means you are letting go of other potential. And trying to optimize freedom is to some degree a fool's game because you're never going to self-actualize.
Isn't this what they say about the development of the brain in a very young child, that it's actually these circuits and connections are being cut away?
Correct.
Or the way you would form a sculpture out of a block of marble.
Yep. And so very much what we're talking about here is self-actualization. I prefer Jung's term, individuation, becoming the most you that you can be.
Interesting. So all of this was designed around this.
Yes.
And you were trained in this.
Correct.
But now you're living up here as a professional.
Sure.
So it's, I guess then part of the magic is, what do we have from here that makes sense to take? And what do we have here that makes sense to leave behind? And then you have to bring in other stuff, other tools, other approaches.
In order to move from here into the performance category, the difference is having a clear metric to optimize. And so once I say that, okay, hey, what I'm pursuing is VO2 max, I can move into a performance optimization. I can move into this frame once I have selected a metric, and the danger is choosing a bad metric. Because then I'm optimizing something that doesn't actually make an impact here.
So now we're getting into the third column. Is it that this is like a general directionality, and then now we're turbocharging it?
Correct.
And this is like the review I saw of the guy who was reviewing the Tesla Plaid.
Okay.
And he said he spent a lot of time going through the car, showing all the features, and then he got in the car. Now we're going to take it for a drive. And he said, now the owner of the car told me something very insightful, and that is, when you're going to step on the accelerator, you have to be very careful about which way the car is pointing, because you're putting like a rocket booster behind it. So here we're trying to get directionally into a more aligned place with what we really care about. Now we're putting rocket boosters behind it.
That's right.
And you're going to hit and go through whatever it's pointing at, and if you have it wrong, the cost is very high.
Correct. And the big objection I have with most of the health influence wellness community is that they make bad assumptions about this, or assumptions that don't apply to a lot of people, and then they use metrics that actually don't make an impact, and then they say, let's optimize those. And let's spend all of our time, energy, attention optimizing something that ineffectively improves a metric that probably isn't what we wanted in the first place.
So it's wrong at many levels.
On many levels.
So if we were to do it the right place, we would understand where we want to go. We would understand what are the right metrics, and then do the right things to optimize those.
And I think we talked about Goodhart's law. My favorite is that once you start using a metric as a target, it ceases to be a good metric. And so you actually need several ways of measuring something so that you can optimize one and still have feedback loop on the other.
So maybe there's a compound metric where a whole bunch of things need to be above a certain threshold, and then a smaller set of things then we're trying to maximize or minimize.
Right.
So if I may,
and we should always remember, of course, like all the things we talked about with markers, right? So we're just talked about, is it in the causal chain? That's kind of what we're just talking about here, right? But also in the optimization process, it's always on a U-shaped curve. So every possible...
Including VO2 max?
Including VO2 max.
Interesting.
At the very least, VO2 max, we know it plateaus, for sure. And it plateaus way lower than most people think.
Really?
Yeah.
So you don't need to be Lance Armstrong to live a long time?
You really don't. You really don't. And in general, so we know VO2 max plateaus, and we also know that in order to get it above certain levels, you really have to exercise a lot. And we know that those levels of exercise probably are on the negative side of the longevity curve.
Oh, interesting.
Now, like I said, different metrics are different. So VO2 max has a very long plateau before it tails off.
I suspect I'm not at risk of this.
Correct. Yeah. But it's also important to say, hey, you're here. How much time and energy do you really want to spend trying to get here? So the question is basically, do you want to spend a ton of time going from here to here?
And this is using the
dollar
analogy here. If you put maybe $10 of your 100 in a VO2 max, you maybe go from here to here. You put another $10, you go to here.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's like, you want 95 out of your $100 to go to there, so you can go from here to here?
And
Because all this other stuff is getting starved.
And that's the thing. I love that Peter Attia has made VO2 max more popular. But he's at the 99th percentile for his age. He says, I want to be at the 99th percentile for the age bracket below me. So he's moving from here to here.
Once you get pretty good at something, isn't there a desire to like want to just keep going?
That's why on these paths, a lot of the cultural ideas are around the notion of wisdom, discernment, learning what's enough, right? Because if you're trying to optimize the path of your life, learning that a metric is just a metric, get it as good as you want it to be, but keep in mind what your real goal is. Now, if you're trying to win the Tour de France, your goal is not longevity. This is not longevity here. This is Tour de France here. And then this curve is very different. Then the curve looks like this, because actually all of this that doesn't apply to longevity absolutely applies to winning the Tour de France. So this definition
Which
changes.
is what got us to blood doping.
Yeah, exactly right. What you choose here determines the shape of this curve. And so you don't know how to optimize VO2 max until I tell you what the goal is, because the definition of optimal has changed.
You have a framework, different dimensions. And I was very impressed when you had mentioned this to me when we went on the walk around Lady Bird Lake. I don't remember them all, but I remember it was very, very broad.
One of the things we talked about here is this notion of time. And if we're going to optimize this path, part of what we want to optimize is the time. If my time looks like this, that's different than if my time looks like this. I can't get very far on my path. Longevity is optimizing this x-axis.
And I guess one thing to put a point on it, in the thought exercise, when somebody meets with their physician and they say you have 6 months to live, all of a sudden your priorities change.
Correct, because I can't pursue the same path I was pursuing.
I'm not going to put energy in the stuff that's going to get me things out here.
And so that's another sort of like reshuffling. Hey, this timeline's short. I want to be on a path. I still want to make use of this 6 months, but I have to choose things that I can make adequate progress on that path. We immediately reorient in that way. So the longevity optimization process is this, right? And I say that there are about 5 metrics. So VO2 max, strength, social connection, don't smoke, and then blood pressure is the last. And this is in order of descending importance. So
and this is in order to maximize time to expiration.
Time to expiration. Yep. And so one of the
Are those in order by significance? Or?
Yes, in order of significance.
Interesting.
So this, and we don't know what the interplay is completely between these, but studied independently, this has about a 5x, 3x, 2x, 2x, let's say, and this is like a 1.15x.
Okay. In terms of the relative weight of the different factors. Okay.
And this is where I argue a lot with a lot of the longevity influencers. They're like, oh, let's add biomarkers, let's add...
Can I interrupt you for a second? Just for the
please.
sake of illustration, could you, here maybe in a different color, just list some of the popular things
Sure.
that are not on that list?
Sure.
Things that people would say, shouldn't this be on the list?
CAC score,
What's
sleep,
CAC?
Coronary artery calcium,
Okay.
sleep, cholesterol. What else do people put on there? There's all kinds of biomarkers, right? I'll just put that in general. Blood, diet, exercise. And my claim is that these impact this, but this is the actual metric. This impacts this, but this is the actual metric. If I try to optimize my sleep, but I don't lift...
Okay, so I think I see where you're going. So what you're saying is, if what you care about is longevity, you should understand this, where you are, what the gap is, and then where there are gaps, then you start looking at these kinds of things and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Absolutely.
Come up with a plan, and that may be part of what you do as a physician with your clients.
Correct. And you say, look, hey, I want to get stronger. I'm not as strong as I want to be. You need to lift, and you need to get enough protein. Those are the first two. Then once you're doing that consistently, and you're doing progressive overload, you're fueling it enough, then yes, you also want to start talking about sleep. You want to start talking about creatine supplementation. Like you can go down the list of how you're optimizing that.
Throughout that curve of diminishing returns.
VO2 max is expressed in milliliters of oxygen per minute.
How much moves through your lungs?
Kilogram. So it's how much you subtract out of the atmosphere. But it's a per kilogram measurement. So your body weight actually has an impact.
So I'm on the US system, so I don't have any kilograms.
Yeah, so you actually have an infinite VO2 max since you have 0 kilograms. No. And so, yes, diet matters. Exercise increases your body's...
So it's not that you don't care about these, but it's in terms of what to watch, it's these 5.
And the reason I emphasize that is that if my VO2 max is in the 99th percentile, it's not clear to me how much that matters. Because the reason I care about this is this. And if I've already got there...
But these may affect blood pressure.
They might. And yeah, so that's what I'm saying, is that if there's a goal, what I object to is purity culture. Oh, you need to eat more organic, you need to eat more whatever. Sure, if it improves your blood pressure, yeah. If it increases your... sure. If it's not, if it's just a moral judgment on your lack of character for eating non-organic grapes, I don't have much stock in that.
I saw a guy with a shirt in the airport that said, count chemicals, not calories.
I think that's one of the things. I think we feel that, but I don't think it's correct. For instance, if you look at the studies, well-done studies, randomized controlled trials on artificial sweeteners, right? The only thing we see is a reduction in weight. There's no increased mortality, there's no increased risk, the rest is moralizing. The science is against you. The science does not show any negative effects. Now, yes, you can say, oh, it changes your microbiome, and oh, it changes this biomarker and that biomarker, and build this story of fear, except that it never has any impact on stroke risk, heart attack risk, mortality, death, or anything.
The things that are big enough to show up in the mortality.
It just changes blood work, right? And how much do you care about a number on a page? Versus the actual, hey, actually, the thing that will affect this is if you lose weight and your VO2 max goes up and you're more fit, that actually does affect. So it's the net positive far outweighs just a number change on a blood work.
So I'd like to hone in on one particular thing here. One of these is not like the others.
Yes.
These 4, these 2 and these 2, these 4
are
obviously connected to physical health. This space, right, where we started. This one, social. So just as a thought exercise, if I have a choice between going on a run versus getting together with my buddies.
Depends a lot on where your VO2 max is.
It may be that getting together with my buddies is a better choice.
It's very possible, yeah.
So tell us more about this, because I would think that 50 years ago, this would not be the kind of thing we're talking about. 50 years ago, we're talking about physiological things.
Sure. I'll put a card up to a podcast I did with one of the foremost researchers on loneliness. And we talked a lot about, it was like a very long discussion of the supporting literature for this. And it is a very convincing set of literature, to the point that if you accept the literature that says that smoking is a negative, you have to accept this literature. Whatever standards you apply to say that this is a valid set of studies.
You're saying the evidence here is as strong, if not stronger, than the evidence against smoking?
As strong, at least. I won't say stronger. Smoking has the benefit of having a mass social change that validated the set of studies that were done. Because we believe the studies, we said, hey, don't smoke. Smoking rates went down, and the rates of lung cancer and heart attack went down from smoking. So we haven't been able to do that for loneliness.
Is this a representative of maybe overall mental, emotional health? I know this is not the whole picture, but you talked about indicators that you would look at. And social connection, it would seem, would have a strong impact on mental and emotional health. But if you happen to have a lot of social connections, but you still had really bad mental and emotional health, you would be in bad shape, right? Or we don't know.
The literature teasing that out is more sparse, right? So as a subset of social literature, the subset of literature that is specifically trying to tease apart, and the way it's phrased, is it the social connection that matters, or is it the experience of loneliness? So is it the objective connections, or is it the subjective enjoyment? And it seems to actually be the objective connections. Really? So it actually, in terms of pure longevity benefit, and just a reminder, we're not talking about quality of life. We're just talking about duration.
Longevity.
And for longevity, the number and type and variety, interestingly, the variety of social connections is the thing that matters, not the quality, not the enjoyment.
But tell me a little more about variety. Does that mean not everybody you hang out with are among
so you have your intimate relationship. So do you live with a partner? You have friendships. You have family. So more parents, children, siblings, right? Immediate family, and then there was extended family.
Okay.
And then there was clubs and organizations. So church, Rotary Club, whatever, Orange Theory, right? Like it's the clubs and organizations, right? And what's interesting is that it seems to function not as a 0 to 5 scale, it seems to function as a checkbox. Okay. So if you are able to check off all 5, that you have some connection in each of these categories, that seems to be the operative factor. So just spending more time with friends, like you have friends and you spend more and more time, it doesn't seem to actually get you the same benefit as having.
Are people who are introverts at a disadvantage here?
Well, that's not the question I thought you were going to ask. Possibly, yes, possibly. I think that's probably true. I think that introverts tend to prefer spending time here and less time here, and that preference probably guides a set of choices. The question I thought you were going to ask, that I actually asked, is it different for introverts and extroverts? And they've actually studied that, and there's no difference. So it affects introverts and extroverts the same. It is merely a matter of how easy or difficult it is. And that goes back even to our weight discussion, like your hunger drive, your socialization drive is a different one. Now you may have to push through that to get this benefit.
If I think of longevity, I think of things like genetics. Now, is this a list of the controllable items?
Yes.
So those kinds of things, therefore, are not on here?
I tend to ignore non-controllable items because I'm uninterested. As a physician, as a practitioner, I think spending time worrying or even thinking about non-controllable factors, unless you're if you want to go into genetic research and try to figure out how to manipulate that factor, great. If you're not doing that, just delete it from your mind.
Genetics
functionally irrelevant.
Functionally hard to control. I mean, maybe 50 years they're working towards that. But what about from
I also have several podcast lectures, put another one up, on genetics. It is vastly more complicated than anyone would like you to believe.
Interesting.
We are very far away from manipulating longevity via genetics.
But what about the economic, the wealth?
That's an interesting factor. One of the challenges is that, okay, if you look at the raw data, it's a big factor, right? Wealthy people live significantly longer than poorer people. It's not clear.
Do we have causal? Do we have causal?
We don't. We don't. That's the problem. That's the problem. Right? It is associative, but we don't have causal data, and we don't have data that factors for these. Meaning, is it because wealthy people have more time to go to the gym and they're less stressed and they're able to eat healthier and eat better food so their VO2 max is better? Is that why? Or is it something else?
So are there people here who are the mega wealthy who actually have shorter longevity than people who are Brian Johnson?
I think that he will die disproportionately young for his wealth because he is trying to over-optimize. Brian Johnson is very wealthy, his huge startup, has developed, I'm trying to be generous here, has developed a fascination with longevity optimization. He is tracking, optimizing, over-optimizing a ton of different metrics by a variety of experimental, that's a generous word, techniques. So he's using anything to optimize the metrics that he's chosen without any evidence that those metrics are actually accurate or meaningful.
So I think what you're saying is your longevity could suffer because you are overtraining on longevity.
Yes. Yes.
That's quite the irony.
Yeah, indeed. Yep.
So how do you know if you're in the sweet spot?
I don't think you can know. I think you have to accept a certain amount of uncertainty. My claim is that you're not going to do better than optimizing these 5. That once you've got these 5 into the 99th percentile,
99th percentile of the population?
Yeah, for your demographic.
That seems like a pretty high bar.
You would think so. It's actually not. And now it's a little bit of a marker of our population, but
if I was to think, if I wanted to be at the 99th, you said for your maybe age and gender.
Yeah.
For age, gender, I want to be at the 99th percentile, VO2 max, strength, social. Getting to the top 1% across all 5 seems like a lot of work.
It's surprisingly within reach for the average person.
Really?
I would say. Yeah. If you're morbidly obese, yes, it's going to be a while, right? If you are massively undertrained or low strength, yes, it'll be a while. But for your average person, it's maybe a little overweight, maybe hasn't really been in the gym. It is getting to certainly the 95th percentile, let's say. Let's maybe lower off the 99th, but getting to the 95th percentile is the work of maybe 2 years of consistent effort.
So maybe if you could just briefly tell me a little bit about what, say, a 50-year-old male 95th percentile, what does that look like?
They have charts for age, gender. Without a chart, I can't off the top of my head.
But there's a number for VO2 max.
Yes, correct.
And you can measure this.
Yes.
And you go get it measured, and if you hit the chart, touch down. Just keep doing what you're doing, measure it every once in a while.
Move on to other things. Yep.
And then for strength, is it based certain, can you lift, or how many push-ups or pull-ups or chin-ups?
Yeah, so the two things that have been measured consistently for longevity are grip strength. The reason I don't like grip strength is that it was chosen because it's easy to measure, not because it's directly relevant. Goodhart's law, if you just optimize this, you're not really increasing your longevity, you're just screwing with the If you're not in a population that's deliberately optimizing that, then it's a valid measure. Once you have people trying to optimize, then it becomes an invalid measure. Right? So the other set of studies is knee extension strength, and that's the one I prefer because it is more directly relevant. In the studies, they use what's called a knee dynamometer, where they lock the knee in at 120 degrees, and you just flex as hard as you can, and you see how much force you're generating. So it's a $15,000 machine, but that's how the study was done.
Okay. And then social, you listed this, so you want to tick the boxes. Hopefully your interest in your partner, your friends, your family, and your clubs goes beyond maximizing your longevity. But
I mean, that gets into quality of life.
And selfishness also, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the smoking, we talked about don't smoke and presumably don't vape and whatever. And then blood pressure.
Yeah, you can try diet and you can try pharmacology. Those are the two big interventions. Exercise, if your VO2 max is already in the 95th percentile, further exercise is unlikely to control your blood pressure.
Okay, and this is a prior point worked down the list.
Yeah.
Although I would think if you're a heavy smoker, you start with that, even though it's down here.
There's a case to be made, probably not.
Interesting.
Right. This is where our social norms disproportionately make us perceive smoking as the huge factor, when in fact VO2 max is probably the huge factor. Now, if you're coughing up a lung and you can't move, okay, that's getting in the way. So maybe you have to stop or reduce smoking in order to participate in any VO2 max optimization. Blood pressure is interesting too. If you look at association studies, so you just raw compare like we were with wealth, it looks like a really big effect. It seems like a very big impact on mortality. And similar things could be said for VO2 max and strength. We've done those kinds of association studies, right? Now, if you actually do a double-blind placebo-controlled randomized trial and you lower people's blood pressure, now you're talking about causation, the effect size shrinks. It's very possible that VO2 max, if we were to do a good trial of intervention, would not be 5x. It would actually reduce down to 4x, 3x, whatever. It's so big that it's unlikely to go away. Same for smoking. It's 2, 2.5. It's so big that we believed it even without having done a randomized control trial. We should probably have the same opinion about social and strength. For something like blood pressure, we need a randomized control trial to tell the difference. The up axis here, that's my sort of special sauce for River Rock, is helping people how they want to, in the current era of their life, define quality of life.
What were your different categories?
First, I have the social triad. So intimacy, family, and community. And it's interesting that each of these is different. This is about authenticity, seeing and being seen, vulnerability. This is about comfort, connection, closeness, belonging. And this is about something like participation. It's the notion in pulling towards a common goal, common value. So these three are social. Then there's the category of making your mark on the world. Impact. Expressing your soul. Artists.
Writers.
You just need to make music or you wither and die. Discovery, exploration, building. So discovery, exploration, building is an interesting category. That's the scientist who's just driven, but it's also the carpenter who just needs to make something. It's the algorithmic tinkerer who wants to optimize your Google AdWords experience, who's just interested in that tinkering, building, discovering kind of experience. They are psychologically different. And that's one of the things I discovered. So I built this out because it's a matter of what optimization works. Like optimizing, this is definitely impact. But optimizing impact doesn't necessarily help this person. They want to explore new space. They want to explore new ideas. This person wants to express their heart. So the optimization ends up being different.
Okay.
So collecting beautiful experiences. Then this is the person who loves travel, loves to taste the food, see the thing. That notion of collecting memories is an important one. Reluctantly, I actually put this on the list. Status. I met somebody that truly seemed to just want more points than everybody else. And I saw his brain short circuit when we were having the discussion.
When you
and
asked
so,
him,
why,
like,
yeah,
it's self-evident.
Self-evident, yeah. And so I put that on there. I haven't met very many other people like that, but I ended up putting that on the list. Each of them has an optimization path. Family, we talk about, because the experience here is one of belonging, security, optimizing that, one of the things I talk about is that it's actually opposed to intimacy. There's a conflict between these two. Because if the experience here is authenticity, what do I do if I'm pissed at you? I'm pissed at my wife. What gives my life meaning is the notion of being seen as I truly am and being vulnerable and taking the risk to express.
That's this one or that one?
This one.
Okay.
The risk to express that I am upset about what you did. Now, I can express that gently. That doesn't mean wielding it as a weapon.
Okay.
The form of that, but it doesn't mean saying the thing.
Right.
Whereas this actually is, hey, let me not rock the boat. She's had a long day. She's tired. Let me optimize for the security and stability of the relationship. Authenticity is in many ways very opposed to that. And there's a fair case to be made that what we want from our intimate or from our spouse is some combination of these.
Interesting.
The challenge is, number one, too much literature tries to pretend they are not in opposition, and then you end up in a weird space where you say, if you make you more secure, then you'll somehow become authentic. That doesn't work. Or if you just maximize authenticity, then your relationship will work out, and that's not true. There is a tension there. It is also the case that many people don't really care that much about authenticity. Like, it doesn't do much for them. Whereas having a secure family environment really enhances their life. They find it deeply meaningful, fulfilling. And so why would they ever rock the boat? Like, what? There's just no value for them here.
And then is this based on your clients?
I start open-ended, right? So my questions are more like, hey, if I told you that you could achieve your goal, whatever your goal is, but in order to achieve it, it would require suffering, difficulty, challenge, pain. What goals would you say that was still worth it? So those kinds of questions I start with, right? Or, hey, imagine you're 95 years old, you're 120 years old, you're looking back over your life and you're, man, I really killed it. I made of my life a success of what it was supposed to be. What did you do? Why? What did you do that made you feel that way? So those kinds of thought experiments I start with, and I still start with new clients because I'm not sure this list is complete.
So we get back together in a couple of years and maybe 10.
Maybe 10.
And it's not like you looked at the different personality types and mapped it out to map out the whole universe. No. This is basically empirical.
Totally empirical. I offered this as a tertiary option for people who are having trouble answering my open-ended questions as a multiple choice, because when I start talking about it, I can see them light up.
Okay, so you don't necessarily show people this list and say, okay, we want to figure out where you are. It's a little bit more, or even for yourself, you're not thinking which of these 8 buckets does somebody land in. You're thinking, I want to understand what makes this person tick, what really matters.
In my experience so far, most people end up in these buckets. The other thing I always say is you need at least 3 of these to feel like a well-rounded person. So I say 1 is a prison, 2 is a dilemma, 3 is freedom. And you see this all the time. Who sinks too deeply into this and loses all the rest, you'll hear her say, I feel like I'm just mom. And I don't remember who Susan is, right? There's a loss of identity in over-identifying with a single path, right?
Makes sense.
CEO who says, all I do all day is CEO. And I don't have a personal life, and I've given up music, and I don't do those things.
So it's not as simple as taking somebody and putting them in one of the buckets. These are, maybe we can even think of it as 8 different dimensions, and you're at different intensity, and you're particularly interested in probably what are their strongest 1 or 2.
I try to articulate at least the 3 strongest.
Okay.
Some people say, okay, I'm not interested in status, and I'm not really artistic, but all the others really speak to me in some way. And I say, cool, if you don't find a way to overlap, that's a 120-hour week. You could do it, but is that the life you want? You'd have to actively be pursuing 120 hours a week to pursue all this. Now, if you have a really great relationship and you can get 2 for 1 here, and then maybe you also have your wife involved in your business, right? And so then you're getting 3 for 1. You might be able to start trying to combine these things into a reasonable timeline, but it's not always the case. That's an option. I do force people to try to rank order.
So I've been going through Will Storr's book, The Status Game, and one of the points of the book is that status is through almost everything we do, and it's all through human society, and it is a much bigger factor in each of us. To what extent are we conscious? We may say what we care about is, say, this, but maybe we care about this a lot more than we give it credit.
I think there's some truth in that. People can have misperceptions of themselves. Those often play out over time. You try and optimize this, you don't feel better, and you say maybe you weren't honest with yourself in some way. I think status is a huge factor. I think for most people, the reason they want status is to pursue something else. If you say, why do you want status? Most people, that's not ground level. Yes, they want...
Maybe it's this.
Correct. Maybe it's this, maybe it's something else. But usually they don't want status for status sake. They want status for something else.
It's a currency that they want to use to buy something.
To buy something, yeah, correct.
To this point then, when you're doing your process, is it a no value judgment? Want to understand what's important to you, and then what's important to you, I'll help you?
Yep.
Interesting. So then tell me a little bit more about when you have these initial sessions. Is it like, yeah, I pretty much knew that? Or was this like, wow, I never thought about it? Or this is a different answer than I would have thought I answered?
Varies a lot by person. It's really variable. I have some people come in, and the first session we sit down, and like in an hour, we've got this whole thing figured out. We've got their rank order. We've got the metrics they want to pursue, and they're ready to all go off to their races and say, okay, I'm going to optimize this. And other people, there's so much uncertainty. They're not sure. They really don't know why they're doing what they're doing.
Is it because they're conflicted, or is it because they just have no idea?
They just have no idea. I think they just haven't considered it. I will say, I think that the more agreeable, are you familiar with the personality characteristic agreeableness? So
somebody who's flexible, willing to go along.
Yeah, willing to go along to get along. Often there are people who are so agreeable that they honestly don't know what they want. They've gone along to get along so much.
Interesting.
And they're so conflict averse that they have a trouble articulating or really even knowing what it is they want.
And agreeable is not a candidate for this list.
Agreeableness is just a personality characteristic. I will say, so this is my sense, just to flesh out the whole model. These are categories of purpose. We talked about individuation. I think individuation in my model has three aspects. Purpose is one, right? The other one is trait expansion, and the third one is value development. So trait expansion is, if I'm introverted, how extroverted can I learn to be? That's character development.
Oh, like versatility.
Versatility. We all have a natural set point. What we call character is the ability to act far outside our set point. If I'm super organized and careful, how much disorder can I tolerate? If I'm super messy, can I learn to be a bit more organized? That building of character is trait expansion, and then the ability to develop consistent set of values and to apply that to oneself and others is, I think, the third characteristic of individuation. So the overall category of these three is individuation, or Maslow's, he called it self-actualization.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so you start with understanding that, and then once this is understood, then you then work on trait expansion? Or?
I do, yeah. Sometimes what the person needs is trait expansion. I talk more about this, I think, even publicly, just because I think our society greases the gears of discussions of purpose, and we've a little bit moved away from the notion of character and the notion of values. But ultimately, sometimes that's what... I don't know, I rarely start with values, although I have had a client or two where that was the most pressing issue. And so we did start there.
So here we're talking about purpose, here we're talking about traits, and here we're talking about values. So when I think of trait expansion, I think of you're in some of these and you start moving into others, but that's the wrong way to think about it, because this is purpose. This is not a list of traits.
Correct. Yeah, so traits, I generally use the Big Five model: openness, conscientiousness, agreeableness, extroversion, neuroticism. So, if somebody is just really prone to negative thinking, it's an element of character development for them to learn not to.
Interesting.
Right? So for each of these, the cultural aspect is going to be more difficult, because the higher you are in openness, the more liberal you are, typically. The lower, the more conservative. But neither of those is inherently bad or good. This is more traditional. You're less open to new ideas. You're less open to information flow. This is, hey, I'm open to all those things, but also I've lost respect for the reason that my family handed down that myth about the tsunami is because tsunamis happen once every 100 years. And so I didn't see any reason for the story, so I just got rid of it. That's the liberal viewpoint. So neither one's good or bad. We need both. Same for conscientiousness, oddly enough. So in our society, we very highly value conscientious, attentive, intentional people. But for quality of life, it's not clear to me that somebody who knows how to chill, knows how to relax, knows how to have a good time, they may not be the most conscientious person in the world, but they add value to our lives. And so that's not inherently a good or bad thing. Agreeableness correlates very well with income. Because a disagreeable person is going to say, no, I'm not taking that salary. You need to do more. Or say, sure, I'll take that salary, but I'm going to keep interviewing for jobs, and then tell these guys to screw off when I get a better one. That disagreeable, entrepreneurs are often phenomenally disagreeable because they're like, all you guys suck, I'm going to go my own way. So agreeableness can be great in the right context, but can also be a liability.
So these have these U curves.
Yep.
But then like neuroticism is something ideally you don't have any of that. It's not like there's a U curve where early on, the more you get, the better you are.
Oddly enough, there is. One of the reasons women tend to be more neurotic, we think, this is pure speculation. So I'm just telling you a story just to illustrate a point, not to make a scientific claim. Women tend to be more higher in neuroticism. But the way you can see where that might be a beneficial thing is that if you're optimizing for the well-being of an infant, sensitivity to negative things happening, threats, is actually a very optimal thing. Like you're like, I can tell that guy's a little angry, we're jetting. This environment feels unsafe, I don't feel good here, I'm out. So that actually can be phenomenally beneficial. Engineers often are a little neurotic, and it's that trait that allows them to spot bugs. I'm extremely disagreeable. I think I was in like the second percentile of disagreeableness. And learning to go along with things, I don't always have to get my way. That is a skill. I don't go along with society blindly. When I was a kid, I dressed very oddly. I wouldn't conform to normal dress. I was like, I'm more comfortable in this. And my individual comfort was much more important than the notion of how I presented or how I fit into the world. And so I was a bit socially outcast. But then I didn't like the loneliness. So again, learning to act outside my disagreeableness, not that I became more agreeable, but I learned to act more agreeable.
Interesting. So this is trait expansion. And then it sounds like, to some degree, this is independent of this.
Yeah. These two things assist with this. So often the obstacle to developing, hey, the reason I want family, I want this, but I'm too disagreeable to build it. So my lack of character is getting in the way of pursuing the purpose I want. Or I'm not consistent in my code.
I'm not sure I understand this then, so maybe we could double click on value development. So what does that mean?
So if we're double clicking on value development, the core element of this, frankly, is trust. And trust and trustworthiness. The biggest aspect here is consistency to others. I think we usually understand that. What I push for in terms of value development is if you treat your own unconscious mind as an other, are you trustworthy to that other?
Wow.
If this is your purpose and this is what your unconscious mind wants, are you trustworthy? Have you fulfilled your promise?
You would need to ask it.
That's the exercise on some level. And so we can understand that with other people, but learning to be trustworthy to ourselves is often where we sometimes fall short.
So maybe give me a couple examples of when people are not trustworthy to their unconscious or subconscious self.
Sure. So playing on examples we've already taken, somebody who's too agreeable, and then they go along with the family, but what they really want is intimacy. But intimacy requires a certain disagreeableness. It requires the willingness to have the fight. It requires to say, yeah, I'm into that weird sex thing. And yeah, I really like Magic the Gathering. And it's not cool, right? But I'm really into it. And I like to gather Pokemon, or I like to, whatever. That's intimacy. But that requires a certain disagreeableness. And because I'm not willing to do that, I've betrayed myself. And so none of my friends actually know, my partner doesn't know who I really am.
Interesting.
That's one example of how that kind of betrayal happens. And yes, you maybe need to build some disagreeableness, but the metric of optimization also is building that trustworthiness to yourself. Is what I said true? If my partner said, hey, are you okay? Did I tell the truth when I said yes? Or was that a lie?
A lie to them, maybe a lie to yourself.
To yourself, yeah.
Wow. So backing up a little bit,
Yeah.
it seems like it's getting into psychology and even well beyond,
Sure.
into values and ethics and all kinds of
Sure.
things.
And just to frame the conversation, all of that is to try to define
The y-axis.
The y-axis.
Okay,
That's the intention behind all of it.
I'm curious, so you were trained as a physician, as a primary care physician. How much of this was part of that training, and how much of this have you layered on top of that training?
None of this was a part of the training. My undergrad degree was in philosophy. And by the way, I very much viewed medicine, even as I was applying to med school, as applied philosophy. I loved philosophy, I enjoyed it, but it's very ivory tower. I don't want to describe the physics of how to catch a baseball, I want to know how to catch a baseball.
I was talking with my wife the other day, and I like to play ultimate frisbee.
Yeah.
And when you throw a frisbee, there's a certain way to do it. I could explain to you exactly how to do a backhand. And if you do what I say, you're going to have a beautiful throw. And I can explain it to you. It's pretty simple. You can learn it and you can do it. But when I myself try to do it with my left hand, I have no luck.
And in order to get your left hand to do it, you would have to do many more reps than your right hand took. And the analogy in that framework here is you're not agreeable, maybe, or you have to develop your left hand's character. And that just takes more reps because it's not its nature.
Right. And the realization was that intellectual knowledge of the technique and the steps and being able to articulate it is actually not the same as knowing it.
Yeah, John Vervaeke, I have a podcast series on his stuff. He talks about the difference between propositional knowledge and participatory knowledge. The propositions of belief of the instructions of how to throw the frisbee is different than knowing how to throw a frisbee. Knowing what it is like to be in love, knowing what it is like to participate in a community, knowing what it is to sacrifice something. Like, those are not propositions. That's not propositional knowledge. And in many ways, our culture has devalued non-propositional knowledge.